Calvin Phillips. Now, Tim, top of the show there, I just teased that Juventus look like the front runners. Tell us where we are with this, then.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. There's been lots of speculation, lots of interest in Calvin Phillips. So far, we're waiting for the Premier League clubs to make their move, but it's my understanding that Juventus are currently the front runners to sign him. I should stress, though, it is very, very much early days on this one, but Phillips is open to moving abroad. He's open to a move to Turin. Absolute key for Calvin Phillips, though, is to play first-team football. He's desperate to play regular first-team football. We're in a European Championship year, and he's had a very, very frustrating time, as you'll be well aware, Mike, at Manchester City. Yes, they've won a lot of trophies, but he's hardly featured. So he knows he has to play football. A move to Juventus, who are going well in Serie A, he could actually add another trophy if he goes there. But this time, I'm sure he'd love to go there and actually feature. So, as things stand, Juventus front runners to sign him, but plenty of interest as well from the Premier League. But it's moving slowly at the moment, this one. But Juventus look to be in a good position. We're waiting for further developments on this one now.
All right, you mentioned Premier League clubs. Which clubs?
Well, Newcastle primarily. They've been long-term admirers of Calvin Phillips. There's no secret of that. But there are lots of challenges to this deal. Obviously, Newcastle are working within pretty strict financial constraints, so there would be a loan fee involved. We would expect it to be a loan deal. A move to Newcastle, I think that would suit Calvin Phillips in terms of his style of football. He thrived under Marcelo Bielsa, playing in that high-intensity football, playing regular football as well. Bielsa, when he managed Calvin Phillips, he got the best out of him, and that's because he was on top of him with every single detail. And Phillips was outstanding, but he was playing week in, week out. And that's what he needs going into the European Championships. And, of course, he has a home north of Leeds as well. So that would be another big tick for him if Newcastle were to firm up their interest. There are other clubs who've shown interest in the past, the likes of West Ham, Aston Villa, Liverpool, even Manchester United. I think that would be very, very unlikely given his links with Leeds United. He's a Leeds boy. But, yeah, lots of interest.
Even more than the fact he plays for Manchester City, the Leeds would be the stumbling block.
Absolutely, yeah. I think he's a Leeds boy, and that rivalry between Leeds and Manchester United is fierce. And when it was talked about previously, before he moved to Manchester City, I think he pretty much came out and said, I'm not going to go to Manchester United. So that looks highly unlikely. But, yeah, lots of interest, and we're in the January transfer window. Games are going on all the time. Injuries here and there could change the situation, but it's very fluid at the moment. But Juventus look to be leading the way. Key, though, for Calvin Phillips, I can't stress this enough, is to play regular first-team football. He's been involved in a very successful side at Manchester City, but now he wants to play, and it's a big 6 months coming up for him ahead of the Euros.
Dharmesh, explain something to me. Manchester City sign him, England international, great player, then don't play him. How come?
Pep Guardiola said it already. He says he's really, really sorry for Calvin Phillips because he simply can't get him in to the Manchester City team. And I mean, Tim's covered this quite a lot, but I just see that this next 6 months as being so important for Calvin Phillips, even though Gareth Southgate has been really, really loyal to all of his players, even if they've not been playing regular first-team football. Harry Maguire was a case in point. Calvin Phillips is another case in point as well. He continues to be loyal to these players and pick them. I just wonder, with 6 months in from the Euros, given Calvin Phillips has barely played this season, if he wasn't to play for the next 6 months, would that loyalty still stretch towards what possibly could be Gareth Southgate's final tournament in charge of England? And that would be such a big call as well. But having said that, the tournaments that he's played in, where he's been successful, a lot of the time Declan Rice and Calvin Phillips have played together, and he trusts that combination. But I'm sure, as Tim alluded to there, Calvin Phillips, for his own benefit, will want to play football, let alone thinking about the Euros.
I think a lot of England's best performances as well have been with Calvin Phillips in that midfield, and it frees up Declan Rice. As you say, Gareth Southgate trusts him. In terms of his character, he's behaved impeccably at Manchester City. It must have been really frustrating at times for him, but he's trained every day. He's trained with a smile on his face every day. He's clearly very popular within the dressing room. So whoever signs him, they're signing a very, very good character. I spoke to him in the summer, and he came back early at the start of pre-season. He was determined to get himself as fit as he could be to make an impression. He lived life properly in the summer so that he came back in the best possible physical shape. He's not had that opportunity. Frustrating for him, but he might get the opportunity now to go somewhere else, play regular football. And if he does, I think there's a good chance that he will be in Gareth Southgate's starting 11 at the European Championships.
Yeah, and I'm sure City fans would wish him well. I want to talk Manchester United, Dharmesh, now. We know they're looking to add to the squad, but if they do that, are they going to be dipping into the bargain bucket?
It's potentially the case. It could be, I don't know, Manchester United fans probably won't want to hear this, but it could be a quiet window with regard to incomings. And one of the big issues that is prevalent for every single club, it seems, at the moment, particularly in a January transfer window, is those three letters, FFP. And those restrictions and having to comply with financial fair play regulations could mean that Manchester United might have to go into the loan market, if they go into the market at all. If you go back to last January, they had to do that very thing because the previous summer they'd spent big and they brought in Wout Weghorst and Marcel Sabitzer on loan. Even at the end of the summer's transfer window, when the bulk of the money was spent on the likes of Mason Mount and Andre Onana, towards the end of the window, they still wanted to strengthen. The likes of Sofian Amrabat came in, Sergio Reguilon came in. Both of those were on loan. And Altay Bayindir, the goalkeeper, came in as backup to Andre Onana, and he only cost £5 million. So that will give you some sort of idea where United are with regard how much they can spend. But it won't stop them keeping their eyes open in the market. And I think a striker is a potential position that they might want to strengthen, simply because I don't think the aim at the start of the summer was to bring in Rasmus Højlund and get him to shoulder the responsibility, which is effectively what has happened. I think they would have wanted to bring in someone with a little bit more experience. One of the names being mentioned that we mentioned back in November as United having an interest in is RB Leipzig's former Chelsea striker, Timo Werner.
Really? Timo Werner?
Now, I'm told at the moment that one, and I'll quote, is not hot at the moment. But
so what does that mean, Dharmesh?
There was
at the moment.
At the moment, listen, the January transfer window is quite famous for teams changing their minds and developing what their recruitment policy is going to be as the window develops. So you could have a situation where in the first 2 weeks, no, we're fine. We don't need to bring anyone in. And in an injury, a loss of form, that can change the mind of a recruitment team, of a manager, and suddenly somebody can come in. And that's what tends to happen in a January window as well, because you see some of these deals happening really, really late. That's not a coincidence. But at the moment, it's not hot. He's only played 4 times for RB Leipzig, started 4 times this season. But if you look at it from Werner's perspective, I think a lot of criticism was aimed at him for his spell at Chelsea. He won the Champions League with them, of course, but it just didn't work out for him. I wonder whether in his mind he's got a case of unfinished business in the Premier League to try and show a few people, actually, I am a good player, I want to show you what I can do. Another player that Manchester United have been linked with is the Bayern Munich striker, Eric Choupo-Moting, once of Stoke City, of course. His opportunities have been limited because someone called Harry Kane has joined Bayern Munich and he's doing quite well there at the moment. He is approaching the final 6 months of his contract, so there's a situation there that Bayern Munich might want to do business, but as it stands at the moment, I think the noises are coming more from Germany and maybe Choupo-Moting's camp rather than Manchester United trying to pursue a deal for him.
OK, that's fascinating. Tim, Dharmesh is saying that United will be looking at loan deals. Which other Premier League sides are going to be counting the pennies?
I think most of the Premier League clubs, it's where we're at the moment. A lot of clubs spent big in the summer. FFP is an issue at the top. It's an issue for clubs at the bottom as well. So I think Arsenal, for example, a club that spent big on the likes of Declan Rice, I think they might look to strengthen, but they might have to work within certain constraints. And we might see, I think, some loan signings in this window, and even down at the bottom of the table, some of the teams that are fighting to stay up, they're also working within strict financial constraints. But as we know in the January transfer window, one deal can trigger another deal, another deal and another deal. So at the moment, we're waiting for that trigger point, that first big deal that maybe gets things moving, gets the ball rolling.
All right, let's talk about the deal then, Dharmesh, chef. Jadon Sancho, any closer than yesterday to going to Borussia Dortmund
again? It looks that way. I'm told that talks between Borussia Dortmund and Manchester United are progressing in a positive fashion over that 6-month loan deal that will see Jadon Sancho returned to Borussia Dortmund, who of course sold him to Manchester United just a couple of seasons ago for £73 million. I think Borussia Dortmund want to get this deal done very quickly because they're going to have warm weather training in Marbella next week, and they want Jadon Sancho to be part of that warm weather training. At the moment, the talks between the clubs, we think, are centred on a potential loan fee and the salary situation. He went from Borussia Dortmund. He was on good money at Borussia Dortmund, but he would have, been on really, really good money at Manchester United. It's whether Borussia Dortmund can cover all of those wages or whether there can be a package that can be put together whereby a loan fee and the salary are covered to a certain extent by Borussia Dortmund. Our colleague Florian Plettenberg at Sky in Germany, who's covering the German end of this deal, he says that the talks are under discussion over a €3.5 million package that would see Jadon Sancho go from Dortmund to Manchester United. It looks like if this deal can happen, it might be a good one for all parties because Ten Hag and Sancho, there's no sign of a reconciliation there as it stands. Jadon Sancho isn't playing. He hasn't played for the best part of 4 months. The last game he played, I think, was the 3-2 victory. He came off the bench against Nottingham Forest. That was way back on August the 26th. And then a week later, in the Arsenal game, that's when everything came to a head. But the timing was so bad for United, 2 days after the window had actually closed. So he's just going to be kicking his heels at United's training ground away from the first team. So we think that they want to accelerate that deal now, Borussia Dortmund, but it could work for everyone because if he performs well and goes to Dortmund, he will then come back to United with still time left on his contract, 2 years plus an option of a further year, but his valuation will be a lot higher than it is now because it's anyone's guess what his valuation is just at this moment in time.
Darmesh says it works for everyone. Do you agree?
It does. It works for Manchester United, an unhappy player. They move him out. It certainly works for Jadon Sancho. He needs to play football. Let's not forget, he was part of Gareth Southgate's plans at the last Euros, and he's faded out of the England setup. He's not playing for Manchester United. I think Dortmund is a home for him. He was comfortable there before. He produced his best football there, and it's a chance for him to maybe rebuild his career, rebuild his reputation, show everybody what he's all about. And for Dortmund, they're not having a great season, so I think it works for them as well. So it seems to suit all parties, and when it suits all parties, usually those are the deals that get done.
All right, we've got a deal that's been done. Some breaking news anyway. Andros Townsend has signed a new long-term contract which will keep him at Kenilworth Road for the foreseeable future. Now, he originally signed a short-term deal back in October. And remember, he hadn't kicked a ball since March 2022 whilst at Everton. Well, he's got a new deal at Luton and he said this. Obviously, I'm delighted. 3 months ago, I thought my career was over. So from going to begging around the world just for a trial to being offered a longer contract is a dream come true. So breaking news coming out of Luton. Andros Townsend has signed a new long-term deal at the club. All right, back to transfers then. And we're going to talk about Aaron Ramsdale. Want to get into this. He's not playing, Darmesh. What's Arsenal's stance?
Yeah, I mean, his world kind of got turned upside down, didn't it, when David Raya arrived at the club. And even though Mikel Arteta said it's competition between the two goalkeepers, I don't have a number one, it's clear what's happened, that David Raya is Mikel Arteta's choice as number one. Having said that, there are no plans as it stands for Arsenal to allow Aaron Ramsdale to leave in this transfer window. That's because Mikel Arteta has always said he wants two top-class goalkeepers in his matchday squad. And you could argue David Raya and Aaron Ramsdale, that too is up there with the best in the Premier League just now. So that's Mikel Arteta's stance. And if you think about it, if they start progressing in the FA Cup as well, because they've got Liverpool over the weekend, if they get through that, and progress in the FA Cup, they're already into the knockout stages of the Champions League, into the last 16. And, of course, they're in a title race. So it's 3 competitions. So I think Mikel Arteta will want to keep everybody, just together. The squad isn't as big as probably he would have liked. And if Ramsdale was to go in this window, what would he be left with? Would he be able to trust the person who would then be below Aaron Ramsdale if David Raya was to get injured, given the magnitude of the games that they would be playing? Now, just sticking with Arsenal, and we mentioned FFP before as well, it's impacting not just Manchester United, but a club like Arsenal as well. And it's likely to be a quiet window on that front with regard to incomings, with regard to Arsenal, because of trying to, comply with these sustainability, profitability and FFP rules. So, yes, of course, any club is going to keep their eyes open for any kind of deals, but there's nothing specific that Arsenal are actually going for. I know there was talk about striker, but when you're looking at the strikers that would be available, is anyone going to be spending in the region of £80 million in a January transfer window to try and bring someone in? Fullback is another area that maybe Arsenal were looking at, but if you look at it, yes, Tomiyasu is gone to the Asia Cup, but he will be back once the Asia Cup is finished. So if you're bringing someone else in, are you effectively bringing him in just for a short period of time? And significantly, Jurrien Timber, one of the big signings that they made in the summer, high hopes for him, got an awful ACL injury very, very early in the season. He is due back before the end of the season. We haven't been given an exact timescale on that, but that will, of course, come into Arsenal's thinking when they think about what they want to do in January.
Tim, I want to go back to Aaron Ramsdale. You stood there and went, Calvin Phillips, got to go, got to play in the European Championship. Isn't it the same for Aaron Ramsdale?
I also stood here and said that the Jadon Sancho deal works for all parties. This doesn't work for Arsenal, does it? Because they'll end up at the end of this January transfer window being weaker. If they get an injury and they need Ramsdale and they let him go, they can't afford to do that. So I think that's the big difference here. Yes, for Ramsdale, it probably is a situation where he needs to play, but Mikel Arteta's got to think about Arsenal. And it could be a red card, it could be an injury. They might need Ramsdale. And who's to say that he won't get an opportunity to play between now and the end of the season? It's not an ideal situation for him, but as Dharmesh mentioned, there are enough games. I'm sure he'll get some game time, and injuries and suspensions do happen. So it's not ideal from a Ramsdale point of view, but I think from an Arsenal perspective, they've got two very, very good goalkeepers, and Mikel Arteta will be happy with that.
Look, make no mistake about it, he does want to play.
Do Arsenal have all the cards here?
Of course, yeah. He's under contract. They don't need to do any business unless it suits them. But make no mistake about it, Aaron Ramsdale wants to play. Of course he wants to play. He's got the European Championships potentially coming up in the summer. And, you talk about injury suspension. Say there's an injury to Jordan Pickford and Aaron Ramsdale isn't playing. Would he then be the first choice to come in to replace Jordan Pickford? That would be another decision that Gareth Southgate would have to make. But I am told that come the summer, I think that's when the whole goalkeeping situation will be reviewed by Arsenal, because that's the time when they will have to trigger the option in David Raya's loan, which is a £27 million permanent deal, which we expect Arsenal to do. Mikel Arteta wouldn't be picking him every week if he wasn't the long-term first-choice keeper. But also Aaron Ramsdale, if he says to Arsenal, look, I've sat there, I've bided my time, it looks like I'm not going to get first-team football here, let me go. They'll review it then.
OK, we've spoken a lot about Arsenal. After the break, we're going to talk Tottenham and